To understand what Kamala Harris said to the National Association of Black Journalists today, you got to understand the Republicans' cynical race strategy. Anytime Kamala Harris says something pro-black, Trump and the Republicans will use it against her to convince white people that she can't be trusted. And anytime she says something that isn't pro-black, they will still use it against her by getting black people to criticize her for not doing enough. So when she sat down with the group in Philadelphia to take questions from black journalists, she didn't say everything that some black people wanted her to say, but she said almost everything she could.
I know that people are deeply troubled by what is happening to that community in Springfield, Ohio. And it's got to stop.
She described Trump's rhetoric as
It's a crying shame.
a response based more on empathy than anger, but she did not specifically endorse a policy of reparations for slavery. Although she supported legislation to study reparations when she was a senator in California, she spoke in broader terms today as the Democratic presidential nominee, mentioning slavery, redlining, and Jim Crow laws. She spoke about student loan debt, medical debt, bias in home appraisals, and black maternal mortality. I support reparations, and I've written about it in my 2 most recent books. But believe it or not, Kamala Harris gave the right answer. Her job is to get elected in a country where most Americans oppose reparations. Although 77% of black Americans support reparations, only 18% of white Americans do. Even here in liberal California, nearly 2/3 of white voters oppose reparations. In a country that's 75% white, that's a non-starter. We can't expect a black woman running for office to explain and sell to white America the complex and unpopular idea of paying reparations to black people in a 3-month campaign while she's still introducing herself and her policies. To do so is to make her a sacrificial lamb for a movement that we haven't even built the momentum for on the ground. To win the presidency, Harris needs at least 42 to 43% of the white vote, which means she has to convince a sufficient number of white Americans that she can represent them while still holding onto black and brown voters. It's a juggling act. How do you maintain your street cred with black and brown voters without alienating sensitive white voters? Some critics point to an out-of-context quote from an interview Harris did in 2019 when she said,
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No.
What they don't quote to you is the rest of the answer, where she explains that
Any policy that will benefit black people will benefit all of society.
clearly she supports race-specific policies that benefit black people, including HBCU funding, affirmative action, and debt relief for black farmers. But as a black politician in a predominantly white country, she still has to remind white Americans that those policies benefit them too by creating a more equitable society. A black Democratic candidate for president faces a frustrating double standard that does not apply to a white Republican like Trump. Trump is not expected to do anything to help black people, so all he does is show up with a wayward rap or a pastor every 4 years, and people grade him on a curve because the bar is so low. But here's the other part of the equation. Kamala Harris also needs a Democratic Congress to enact her agenda. Republicans now control the House, and Democrats hold a narrow 51 to 49 seat majority in the U.S. Senate. Republicans are expected to pick up the Senate seat in West Virginia with the retirement of Joe Manchin, and they're hoping to defeat Democrat John Tester in conservative Montana. If they win those 2 seats, Republicans will take control over the Senate and block any progressive legislation and possibly Supreme Court justices for the next 2 years. If you think Democratic senators are going to win Montana and West Virginia with the Democrat at the top of the ticket calling for reparations, you haven't been paying attention to race issues in America. There's a method to the madness from Republicans. They continue to launch racist attacks against Harris because they're desperately trying to get her to fight on controversial race and culture issues. Trump wants Kamala Harris to attack him for being racist instead of focusing on her broader agenda for America. He knows that if he can get her to engage, they can mislabel her with the angry black woman troll. That's why he continues to lie about the Congo releasing inmates into the United States. That's why Trump and Vance are promoting racist rhetoric about the White House smelling like curry and fried chicken if Kamala Harris gets elected. They're not just motivating their base, they want Harris to say something to turn off white voters. She was wise not to take the bait. It may not be the truth we want to hear, but she understood the assignment.